11th question, what is cloud seeding? And comment on Karnataka's earlier effects. Okay, so here again you have two parts. One, what is cloud seeding? So as I've already told you, if a question is talking about a concept, always start your concept by giving the definition or explaining that concept or technology. So here you'll start the answer by explaining what is cloud seeding. So you'll write that cloud seeding is nothing but a form of weather modification to change the amount or type of precipitation. How will you do this? You will do this by dispersing chemicals into the air for condensation of water vapor and to initiate the formation of clouds. What are the chemicals used? The chemicals used are silver iodide or dry ice. How are these chemicals dispersed into the atmosphere? By the use of planes or rockets. So you have now explained this concept or technology of cloud seeding. If you have time, if you have space, you can mention further by saying that silver iodide is crystalline in nature and hence it can induce nucleation. Or you can say that dry ice is so cold that it will promote spontaneous nucleation of water vapor into water molecules. So this will explain what is cloud seeding, what is the first part of the question. Now, the second part talks about comment on Karnataka's earlier effects with cloud seeding. So here, in the second part, you will also have to consider the advantages and disadvantages. You simply cannot write about Karnataka's earlier effects and leave it. You'll also have to mention the advantages and disadvantages. So the second part of the question can be divided into two parts. One, where you talk about Karnataka's efforts, and in the second part, you'll write about the advantages and disadvantages, following which you can end the answer. So I'm pretty sure you know that some time back, we had taken up this project, Varshadhare, at a cost of 35 crore rupees, where in Karnataka we had irregular rainfall, where many areas were deficit in rainfall. Therefore, we took up project Varshadhare as an experiment to see if we'll receive enough rainfall. Okay, so thanks to project Varshadhare, where chemicals were dispersed into the atmosphere, we were able to increase precipitation by 27.9%, almost approximately 28%. We were able to increase precipitation. So yes, we were able to combat drought, but not up to a very great extent. There was only around 28% increase in rainfall, but it was at a cost of 35 crore rupees. But the problem is that considering the size of Karnataka, the extent of Karnataka, it is not possible for us to do cloud seeding for all regions or all districts of Karnataka. Okay, so it is not possible. So rather the solution is to give importance to water conservation and judicious use of water, and constructing canals and irrigation channels and storing water rather than depend upon rainfall, and if not rainfall, go for cloud seeding. Cloud seeding should only be a last resort. Yes, it does have advantages in increasing precipitation, but as of today, we are not understanding the disadvantages. The disadvantages of cloud seeding is yet not fully understood as to what can happen if man tries to meddle with weather. Man tries to meddle with weather. Plus, there have been instances where cloud seeding was taken up, but it did not result in increase in rainfall. So you can mention certain advantages and disadvantages, following which you can end the answer. Okay. Next is, what is additive manufacturing? What is additive manufacturing? Now, the question is talking about additive manufacturing, and then the second question talks about how is it revolutionizing organ transplantation. So again, you will break this question into three parts, where you will start the question by explaining what is additive manufacturing. In the second part, you will explain the second part of the question. You will break it into two parts, where in the first part you will explain how is additive manufacturing revolutionizing organ transplantation, and in the third part you will write the merits and the demerits of additive manufacturing in organ transplantation. Okay, so the first part is what is additive manufacturing. See, additive manufacturing is nothing but 3D manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is nothing but 3D printing, where additive manufacturing is a better term rather than 3D printing, because in additive manufacturing, it is manufactured by adding layers one over the other. It is like we are adding layers. Why is it known as additive manufacturing? Because it is nothing but addition. Say, for example, take plastic and you are manufacturing something. So what will happen? You will make use of your CAD, computer aided drawing and design. You will make use of it to come out with a design. Once the design is complete, in the 3D printer, that molded plastic is added layer by layer on top of it. We add it layer by layer to finally manufacture or build something. See, it is just like building a house. So you will start laying the bricks from the bottom, right? You will start laying the bricks from the bottom and you will go up, and you will go up based on the design of the house. Similarly, you'll have an injector where plastic can be injected, and this plastic is added layer by layer to manufacture, which is something which has something already been designed. This is nothing but your additive manufacturing. So your National Electronic Policy 2019 also boosts additive manufacturing. It gives importance to additive manufacturing in India. It also gives importance to additive manufacturing in India. Once that is done, you can move on to the body, where you'll try to explain how is additive manufacturing used in medicine, how is it used in regenerative therapy, for example. So now the question is that if plastic can be used, if molded plastic can be added layer by layer, is it possible for us to develop an organ itself? So as of today, research is going on where instead of molded plastic, we are making use of something known as bio ink. We are making use of something known as bio ink, where by making use of bio ink, we should be able to manufacture or develop an entire organ itself. So what will be done is that this bio ink will consist of fibrin or fibrin polymers. Fibrin polymers which will be integrated with cellular adhesion molecules. Fibrin molecules will be integrated with cellular adhesion molecules. See, what will be done is that, say for example, if a person if a person wants an artificial heart to be manufactured, so what will happen is that first a biopsy will be taken from the tissues. So if you want the heart to be manufactured for heart transplantation, certain tissues of the heart will be taken. Okay, once the tissues are taken, the materials from the tissues will be separated. All the materials, see, the tissues is nothing but a collection of cells. In that cells, you'll have so many other parts of a cell. So all the different parts, all the different parts of the tissues will be separated, and once they are separated, it is mixed with a gel to form a hydrogel. Hydrogel, which is finally mixed with stem cells. And you know what are stem cells? Stem cells can be used to manufacture any other type of a cell. So this hydrogel, which has been formed by taking tissues from the heart, will be mixed with stem cells, where these stem cells can be, promoted, can be initiated to develop into any other type of cell, and hence these stem cells will be initiated to form heart tissue cells, the cells which make up the heart tissues. And this will be used as the bio ink, and this bio ink will be injected layer by layer to form a heart, and this heart can be transplanted into the human. Therefore, this is the future of regenerative therapy. This is the future of medicine, where humans will be able to manufacture an organ. And the best part is that since it can be manufactured from the tissues of the patient itself, the chances of the body rejecting the artificial organ is slim. It is actually slim. Hence, you can mention these aspects of additive manufacturing, manufacturing organ transplantation, and give certain advantages or disadvantages, and then end the answer. Next, you can talk about what are the challenges facing in the biotechnology sector in India. Okay, now this is a very brief and very straightforward question. Okay, So what are the challenges facing biotechnology sector in India, and briefly explain its scope and applications. Briefly explain its scope and application. Very straightforward. You should be able to write this question. See, first of all, you can start the question by talking about the importance of biotechnology. You can talk about the importance of biotechnology. See, in India, the field of biotechnology is one of the largest and fastest growing sectors in India. And that is why, by recognizing the importance of biotechnology in India, the government of India set up the Department of Biotechnology under the Ministry of Science and Technology. The Ministry of Science and Technology has the Department of Science and Technology, has DSIR, but it is only biotechnology which has its own department under the Ministry of Science and Technology, and that is the importance of biotechnology. That is the importance of biotechnology. So the Department of Biotechnology is responsible for promoting biotechnology sector in India, and considering the importance and challenges facing, the government has set up this department. So once you have done writing that, you have given an introduction to this sector, and then you can start with the body, where you can mention some challenges which are faced by the biotechnology sector, following which you can talk about the scope and applications. So you can talk about the various challenges faced in biotechnology sector for in India. For example, one of the most important aspects is investment. Investment in IT sector is there, no problem, but investment in biotechnology sector is very low even today in India. Apart from that, when it comes to conducting a lot of research, you always have ethical issues which always crop up. Ethical issues which always crop up. The second is the availability of well-skilled engineers in the field of biotechnology. The payment gap which is present within the sector of biotechnology, the gender divide which is present within the sector of biotechnology, this and the opportunities to scale up in the field of biotechnology sector. These are the various challenges which is faced within biotechnology sector, because of which government support in this sector is very important. So there are many other challenges which are written in the answer, which you can straight away. That is very straightforward question. Just mention the challenges in the biotechnology sector, followed by which you can mention the scope and applications. Where in the scope and applications, you can talk about how biotechnology can be used in agriculture, it can be used in animal husbandry, it can be used in medicine, for example, such as gene therapy, curing of diseases. It can be used in forensic science. It can be used in genetics, microbial genetics, environmental science. It can have industrial applications. It can have industrial applications. It can have applications in mining, wastewater treatment. You can have different scopes and applications for biotechnology, for which you have several advantages. You can write anything and everything that you want when it comes to scope and applications of biotechnology. And if you're able to write this, you'll be able to complete your answer. Next question is jumping genes. Your next question is jumping genes. Now, this is once again kind of a knowledge intensive question. So until and unless you have thorough understanding of what is jumping genes, you will not be able to explain, or you'll not be able to answer this question. Okay. So the question is asking, what is jumping genes? What is jumping genes, and how is it an alternative to CRISPR-Cas9? So first, what will you do? You will explain what is jumping genes in terms of DNA editing or genetic engineering. So for that, start your answer by explaining what is genetic engineering. Once you are done explaining genetic engineering, then you can move on to the body of the answer, where you explain what is jumping genes, and then compare jumping genes with CRISPR-Cas9. With CRISPR-Cas9, I think by now everybody should know what is CRISPR-Cas9. Where CRISPR-Cas9 is also nothing but another method for genome editing. So here jumping genes is a better alternative to CRISPR-Cas9, and hence you have to give your arguments in favor of jumping genes as a better alternative to CRISPR-Cas9. See, what is genetic engineering? What is genome editing? It is nothing but engineering or change or modification of DNA, where you are going to insert, delete, modify, or replace certain sequences in the DNA of an organism. Of an organism. Okay, so this technique can be used to edit genes more precisely. Jumping genes can be used to edit genes more precisely than CRISPR Cas9, because as of today CRISPR technology is used where enzymes like Cas9 enzyme or Cas13 enzymes are actually used to cut and delete portions of the genetic code and make use of the repairing function, the natural repairing function which is present within the cell to repair that DNA and bring about the necessary modification inside the DNA. But if you take jumping genes are more effective because when it comes to CRISPR-Cas9, CRISPR-Cas9 will depend upon the repair mechanism of the cell to bring about mutation in the DNA. The problem with this is that if you're depending upon the repair mechanism of the cell itself to bring about the mutation or the modification in the DNA, it is also possible that this repair mechanism will not yield the required result that you are expecting for, where this repair mechanism itself can lead to cancer because you are not able to control the repair mechanism. This CRISPR-Cas9 is only going to initiate the repair mechanism, but not control the result. You can only hope that the result will bring about your expected result, but sometimes, at times, the expected result can lead to cancer as well. Therefore, jumping genes can be a better alternative to CRISPR-Cas9. How? Because jumping genes are also known as your transposons, which have the ability to jump from one site to another site within the DNA to insert genetic information by making use of enzymes known as transposase. Transposase. Okay, where you will not entirely depend upon the repair mechanism of the cell, rather you will be able to insert sequences of nitrogen bases into the DNA and hence bring about genome editing. Okay, so if you are able to explain this, you will be able to show as to why jumping genes is a better alternative to CRISPR-Cas9, and hence we can bring about genome editing, and hence we'll be able to treat genetic disorders at a very early stage and help humans to be free of genetic diseases. The next question is, what is herbicide tolerant HTBT cotton? Why was it in news recently? So everyone is aware of BT cotton. Everyone is aware of BT cotton. What is BT cotton? BT cotton is nothing but Bacillus thuringiensis cotton, where BT cotton has been developed by Monsanto. Now, this herbicide tolerant BT cotton is also another variety of BT cotton also developed by Monsanto, where this BT cotton is a genetically modified crop. By now, you should know that the only genetically modified crop which is which has been given legal approval for cultivation is BT cotton. What is a genetically modified crop? BT cotton is a GM crop where its genetic sequence has been modified to give it certain advantages over your normal cotton. So then the question is that who gives permission for the cultivation or for the commercial growth and use of GM crops? That is your genetically engineered approval committee. We have something known as GEAC, Genetic Engineering Approval Committee under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So whenever any genetically modified crop has to be given permission to be grown in India, the permission is to be given by GEAC. So as of today, GEAC has given permission only to BT cotton, where in this Bt cotton, certain genes known as cry genes from the bacteria Bacillus thuringiensis have been inserted into the cotton plant, where the cotton plant now has the capacity to produce certain toxins, where these toxins are toxic to your bollworm, which feed on cotton plants, which feed on cotton plants. Okay, so therefore we are giving it an immunity against these cotton plants, so that these against these worms, so that these worms are not able to destroy cotton plants. They're not able to destroy cotton plants. Okay, so this has been given approval. Now the question is, what is the controversy about HTBT cotton? Now what has happened is that Monsanto came out with a variety of BT cotton known as herbicide tolerant BT cotton, where this BT cotton has once again been genetically modified. This itself is genetically modified, but the BT cotton has been once again genetically modified to give it resistance against a herbicide. So what is the advantage is that, say for example, you have a field over here, and you have cotton, and you have cotton plants. Okay, but along with that, you can have weeds. So what happens if you have other weed? The farmer would obviously would not want the weed to be growing next beside the cotton plants, and would hence like to remove the weed. But until now, he was not able to use the herbicide, because if the herbicide was used against these weeds, when the herbicide would kill the weeds, it would also kill the cotton plant. But now by genetically modifying the cotton plant, this HTBT cotton plant is now tolerant to this herbicide, so that when you spray this herbicide on a cotton field, the cotton plant will not die, only the weed will die, and hence it is more resistant. And therefore farmers now are more willing to purchase HTBT cotton, because it is easier for them to make use of the herbicide and kill the weed. But the problem is that the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee has not given approval to HTBT cotton, and farmers in India are illegally using HTBT cotton. It is being supplied, sold illegally in India, and they are making use of these HTBT cotton illegally. The problem is that we do not know what could be the repercussions. Now farmers might start using this herbicide excessively, which can lead to soil pollution, which can lead to certain other harmful effects as well, due to the indiscriminate use of this herbicide. Okay, if I'm not wrong, it is glyphosate. If I'm not wrong, that is the herbicide to which this HTBT cotton has resistance. That is the controversy which is surrounding around HTBT cotton, and hence you can write about this controversy in your body. And finally, you can conclude by saying that it is necessary for us to use GM crops judiciously and wisely, because there can be transfer of there can be transfer of seeds from the GM crop to wild variety crop, where the wild variety crop can also be polluted genetically with this genetically modified variety of crops. And hence it is very, very important for us to conduct more research, and also research into how these genetically modified crops may affect humans as well. By mentioning that, you can conclude this particular answer. Next question is 15th question, where the 15th question says RBI issued a directive advising all payment system operators to ensure data localization. That is, the entire data relating to payment systems be stored within databases located in India. So what is the need for data localization, and what are the challenges involved? So this is your question over here. Okay, so how will you address this question? The introduction will be your definition or explanation of what is data localization. The second part of your answer will talk about why do we need data localization, meaning why is RBI pushing for data localization. And the third question will talk about the challenges of data localization, meaning the challenges will mostly involve disadvantages and the need of data localization will generally involve advantages of data localization. So you will give the definition for data localization, then you will talk about the challenges, then you will talk about the need for data localization, and third you will talk about the challenges involved, and then you will be able to complete the answer. Okay, see, what is data localization? Very simple. Take Google Pay for example. Okay, take Google Pay. Now, Google Pay is a payment system. I'm just giving you a very simple example. Okay, I'm not saying it is how it is going to happen. Or take WhatsApp for example. Where do they have their databases? Google's database, Facebook's database. Do they have their database in India? No. Where is the database? The database is located where? Database is located in USA. So if Google Pay's database is located in USA, all information about payment, account, user, all this information is stored in USA. All this information is stored in USA. If all the information is stored in USA, then we do not have control over this information, where this information is nothing but information about Indians. We do not have control over our own information in India. Therefore, RBI is saying that all this information which is collected by these payment system operators should be stored in India. So what is data localization? Data localization says that all that personal data of a country's country citizens shall be processed and stored in that country itself and not in some other country. Meaning Google will collect, store, process, use that information only in India and not somewhere else. This is known as data localization. Next, you will talk about the need for data localization. Why is data localization necessary? See, obviously, one of the most important information is security, data security. If we don't have physical access, we don't have access to our own information, how can we secure the information of our own citizens? So for security, it is very, very important. Two, for economic development. See, data is the new currency. Data is the new currency. Whoever has access to more data, he is able to make use of that data. He is able to sell that data to generate revenue. So for economic development, where Indians are generating so much of data every day, this data has to be stored in India so that we can make use of this data for economic development. Especially when India is moving towards a digital India, more and more digitization is taking place. It is important that all that data is stored in India. Next point you can talk about is technology development. See, if we have to develop technology to store this data, that technology should be developed in India. We are now talking about big data. So if all the information is stored in USA, the development of technology for big data, the ability to store petabytes and exabytes of data will be available in USA, not in India. So we also need technology development in India. Finally, you can also talk about tax revenue in India. If the data is stored in USA, if the data is used in USA for all commercial purposes, tax revenue, tax generated will go to USA and not India, even though the information or data was generated in India. That is why it is necessary for data localization, that is data to be stored in India. Finally, you can talk about challenges involved. Okay, what can be the challenges? Once again, about security itself. If we are saying data should be secured in India, who will guarantee security? Does India have the legal measures to guarantee security of that data? Okay, do we have the technical capacity to store that data in India? So all these aspects you can involve to write about the challenges involved for data security, for data localization in India as well, and you'll be able to complete this answer. Okay, the next question talks about artificial intelligence. The next question talks about artificial intelligence, where it says that in the 2018 to 2019 budget, for the first time, funds were set aside for artificial intelligence. First time, the funds were set aside for artificial intelligence, where in 2019, Niti Aayog circulated the cabinet note to establish a cloud computing platform called Airavat, Artificial Intelligence Research Analytics and Knowledge Assimilation Platform. So considering the recent interest in AI, detail the various applications and risks involved in artificial intelligence. So, once again, even though it seems to be a very big question, the answer for the question can be pretty straightforward. It need not be very, very complicated. Okay. So, one is you can start the answer by explaining what is artificial intelligence and its importance and why we have to invest and develop technology when it comes to artificial intelligence in the country. Second, you can bring about the various applications, challenges, risks, and ethical problems involved in artificial intelligence. And finally, conclude that based on the applications, challenges, risks, and ethical problems, it is necessary for the government to invest in artificial intelligence rather than only depend upon the private sector. And at the same time, come out with public private sector collaboration in the field for proper development of artificial intelligence in the country. See, by now you know what is artificial intelligence, nothing but to develop machines which have the intelligence of a human, which have intelligence of humans. Now, when the rest of the world is moving towards artificial intelligence and the rest of the world is moving towards machine learning, okay, it is also important that India also sets aside funds for the development of artificial intelligence and for investment and development and research in the country, where machines are able to reason, solve problems, perceive, and also communicate with each other. After that, you can bring about in the body the various applications, the advantages, disadvantages, and ethics of human intelligence. See, one of the most important areas of artificial intelligence is applied intelligence, and also strong artificial intelligence. This strong artificial intelligence is dangerous. That is, we are talking about to produce machines which will have the intellectual abilities and capacities as that of a human. Meaning, if we are able to successfully develop strong artificial intelligence, then machines will have the same level of intelligence as humans. And if that is possible, machines will be able to evolve themselves. They'll be able to develop themselves, which will be at a much faster rate than humans are able to comprehend and able to develop themselves. Therefore, it has risks and also ethics involved as to will artificial intelligence give itself more importance than human life. Then you can also talk about certain advantages and disadvantages. Disadvantages could be that artificial intelligence can malfunction, it can lack human sensitivity or sensation, or it could once again lead to loss of jobs. You can talk about technology with a human face over here. At the same time, you can also talk about advantages. For example, artificial intelligence can help in aiding in medicine, for example. It can be used in treatment. It can be used for computing complex mathematical problems. It can be used as in robots in outer space exploration. It can be used for simulation. It can be used to do complex jobs that humans are not able to do. So all these things you can nail it down and you can structure it properly so as to conclude this particular answer. Next question. With India planning to send Indians into space in 2022, it is expected to cost us 10,000 crore rupees. Highlight the benefits of such a mission. Now, once again, this is a bit similar to the previous question where we had to bring about the socio-economic progress or development from space technology. Okay, so you can answer this question in that manner itself. Okay, in those lines itself. So you know that we are planning to send Indians into space in 2022, and we are calling it as Gaganyaan. So briefly, you can write about Gaganyaan, where you can explain that Gaganyaan is an ambitious endeavor of the country, where we will make use of GSLV Mark III to put 3 Indians into orbit, into low Earth orbit to test our technology demonstration and also to conduct research and also act as a stepping stone for future outer space exploration. Then you can bring about the various challenges in the technological development required in Gaganyaan and how it can be used for the development of future programs and missions in India. Say, for example, you can talk about Caspol. Okay, so ISRO actually developed Caspol, which is actually a polymer for spacecrafts returning to Earth. See, if we are sending humans to space, we have to bring them back. And when humans are brought back to Earth in a spacecraft, due to friction, the temperature increases to a very great extent, to very high degree Celsius. So we need a polymer to protect the vessel, the spacecraft in which humans are brought back to Earth. Now, this Caspol, for example, which has been developed by ISRO, can be used as a fire retardant and a temperature controlling polymer on houses, on trains, in movie theaters, so that they don't catch fire and temperature can also be controlled. You have Kalam Raju's tent. Okay, so this is a stent which has been developed from high grade steel used for rockets. So when ISRO was developing and manufacturing rockets, they realized that this stent can be used in medicinal purposes, where these stents can be inserted into human bodies for circulation of blood. I'm just giving you examples. You have care technology which was developed, the care technology which was developed to bring back humans back to Earth. Okay, so these are all the various spillover of technology which has been possible thanks to investment of money and resources into space missions. So it does not mean that if you are spending 10,000 crore rupees for sending humans to space, it is going to be totally worthless. This 10,000 crore rupees has led to development of lakhs of jobs in India because ISRO has entered into partnership with various organizations across the country, including Larsen and Toubro, and simply because of the government investing 10,000 crore rupees, thousands and thousands of jobs have been created in the country, and all the technology that will be developed will be available for future use in the country as well. So it is not that we don't have any benefits, we will have several benefits. So this can also lead to space diplomacy where we are able to cooperate with other countries in the future. We can have international space flight programs in the future. We are training humans in advanced technology thanks to this program. So these are all the various benefits and advantages that we will have apart from sending humans into outer space. Plus, we will be entering into that elite club where we will be one of the few nations who will be able to successfully and indigenously send humans into outer space. 19th question is, the National Green Tribunal recently upheld the environmental clearance granted to the Indian-based Neutrino Observatory in Theni district of Tamil Nadu, a major research facility proposed. What is the significance of this research facility? Okay. Now, the research facility is INO, Indian Neutrino Observatory. Indian Neutrino Observatory. Now, see, India was a pioneer when it came to research into neutrinos. See, neutrinos are electrically neutral subatomic particles. Okay, so the problem with neutrinos is that they are highly unreactive. It is very, very difficult to identify and detect neutrinos because they are not affected by electromagnetic radiations. They are only affected by gravity and weak nuclear force, and therefore it is very, very difficult to detect neutrinos. And in order to detect neutrinos, it is very necessary for us to develop special research facilities. And if we are able to detect neutrinos, we will be able to get information about the origin of the universe itself, because they are very unreactive, and hence neutrinos which were generated at the beginning of the universe, they are still available to be studied, and those neutrinos can be identified and detected for us to understand the birth of the universe itself. Plus, it can be about the explosion of a star, a supernova, any major event which is taking place in the universe. It would develop it would produce neutrinos, and if these neutrinos can be detected, we can have information, we'll be able to study everything about the neutrinos. On top of that, whenever you have a nuclear explosion, a nuclear reactor, once again neutrinos are generated. So by making use of these neutrino observatories, we can study about nuclear explosions which are taking place across the world as well. So I'm just giving you a few examples as to what are the advantages of developing a major neutrino observatory such as this. Okay, now the problem was that when they were initiating this neutrino observatory, we used to have this neutrino observatory in Kolar earlier, but then it was shut down in the Kolar goldfield, and hence it was necessary to build this observatory elsewhere, and this observatory has to be built underground itself. It has to be built underground itself. So they were trying to build it in Tamil Nadu in the Theni district, but the problem was that this was very close to a national park in Idukki. Okay, so what had happened was that earlier the National Green Tribunal had given a go ahead. Okay, said that it would not require any environmental impact assessment. But many people started to protest against this particular observatory, saying that the building up of this observatory will affect the national park in the close vicinity, and people were ignorant about neutrinos, saying that neutrinos, they people assume that neutrinos will affect human health as well, and they started to oppose this observatory. See, it is like people oppose nuclear power plants. Why? Because they believe that they could be affected by nuclear radiations or nuclear explosion. So now people did not understand what were neutrinos, and they started to protest. So what happened was that the National Green Tribunal, which had said that no environmental impact assessment was necessary, was questioned, and hence this particular project was delayed. But now it has upheld the environmental clearance granted to Indian-based Neutrino Observatory. So then you can talk about neutrinos as to why neutrinos are important, because it is important for us to study major events in the universe, discover aspects of the birth of the universe itself, and also nuclear explosions which take place elsewhere. Plus, it has to be built underground because neutrinos have to be studied in an environment without any disturbance. Okay, so that is why it is important for us to build this research facility, and this will give India an edge over many other nations, because India would be again one of the few nations to conduct research into neutrinos. Next question: what is nuclear fusion? What is its significance? Has there been any attempt to realize energy from nuclear fusion? Okay, very simple question. It has three parts. What is nuclear fusion? So you will start your answer by explaining what is nuclear fusion. What is nuclear fusion? Whenever two lighter elements combine to give rise to a heavier element, there's a small change in mass. That difference in mass is given out in the form of energy. That is nuclear fusion. That energy can be used to produce, and that energy can be utilized for human activity. What is its significance? As of today, we are only able to carry out nuclear fission. But now we are talking about nuclear fusion. See, we know that nuclear fusion is taking place on the surface of the sun. But we now want to control nuclear fusion. But the problem is that we are not able to carry out nuclear fusion on Earth, because the temperature required, the amount of energy which is actually required to overcome the repulsion between the two nucleus of the two lighter atoms is way more than the amount of energy that would be produced. Plus, no material on Earth would be able to handle or bear that high temperatures, and it would simply melt. But nuclear fusion can produce a very lot amount of energy as well. Nuclear fusion can produce 4 times the amount of energy when compared to nuclear fission. Therefore, it is important for us to identify methods of carrying out nuclear fission. See, 100 years back, you did not have nuclear fission, but in the recent past, we are able to produce energy through civil nuclear fission. So now the hope is that one day we will have the technology to develop nuclear energy from nuclear fusion as well. And that is the significance, because when compared to nuclear fission, the fuel available for nuclear fusion is abundant. Okay, if you continue with nuclear fusion, the world will run out of uranium in a few hundred years. But that is not the case with nuclear fusion. We'll have the fuel available for nuclear fusion is abundant. Plus, nuclear fusion will produce 4 times the amount of energy as nuclear fission. On top of that, you do not have the problem of radioactivity, neither do you have to deal with radioactive waste. Therefore, nuclear fusion is more important, is more safe, and more energy efficient when compared to nuclear fission. Hence, yes, there have been attempts to realize energy from nuclear fusion. One example is your ITER, International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor in France. International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor in France, where India is also a party to this experiment. India is also a party to this experiment, so that one day, yes, nuclear fusion will be taken up. So if you're able to explain all these things, read through the answer. I have also mentioned about, I should have mentioned about International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor as well. You should be able to complete the answer. Finally, last one is about biotechnology once again. Is about biotechnology once again. Now, the question says, what is green biotechnology and what is the role? What is the role of biotechnology in ensuring food technology? Now, I think this is very simple. This is a very simple question. So you can explain what is green biotechnology as part of your introduction. Then you can talk about the applications of green biotechnology and how is it going to help in ramping up food production. And finally, discuss about the advantages and disadvantages and how do we improve or deploy this technology in India. See, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what is green biotechnology. Green biotechnology is nothing but a field or area of biotechnology to develop agriculture. So green biotechnology is considered to be the second phase of green revolution because it is mainly meant to deal with development of agriculture to develop fertile and resistant plants which are resistant to biotic and abiotic stress, where they are able to produce more food. So once you explain green biotechnology, you can give the various applications of green biotechnology. Say for example, genetic engineering. I told you about BT cotton. Okay, so similarly, we are now doing, we are genetically modifying other plants as well. You would have heard of BT brinjal. Now we are trying to genetically modify different varieties of rice. You have golden rice. You have different varieties of tomatoes which have been genetically modified so that they don't ripe soon, and hence tomatoes have a greater shelf life. We are trying to modify rice to have greater nutrients, greater levels of nutrition, vitamin content. So all these things can be put in to give the advantages and applications of green biotechnology, which will ensure that the world will never ever run out of food. And hence, finally, you can also give certain suggestions as to the role of GEAC and the Department of Biotechnology to ensure that it is necessary for them to develop a proper regulatory mechanism to ensure that this does not lead to any spillover effect where other wild varieties are affected. At the same time, proper research must be conducted before it is released into the wild or for commercial cultivation. So these suggestions, you can actually end your answer. Okay then. Thank you. I hope you've understood this. If not, you can still go to the answer key for a more better comprehensive understanding. Thank you.